Queen Zixandra stood 8 feet tall on her throne, her black armor gleaming under the palace lights. Her sharp claws tapped against the metal armrest as she watched the small human walk into her throne room. The creature looked so fragile compared to her mighty Veltar warriors. Dr. Marcus Chen carried a simple bag over his shoulder and wore plain brown robes. His dark hair was messy from travel and dirt covered his boots. He looked nothing like the fierce warriors that usually came before the queen. The Veltar guards around the room tried not to laugh at his appearance. "Your Majesty," Marcus said with a polite bow, "thank you for allowing me to study the ancient ruins on your world." Zixandra leaned forward, studying this strange visitor. Humans were new to this part of space. Most aliens feared the Veltar Empire and its powerful military. But this human showed no fear at all. He just stood there with a gentle smile, waiting for her response. "You are here to dig in the dirt?" she asked, her voice deep and commanding. "Yes, Your Majesty. I study old cultures and their artifacts. The ruins on your planet are very old and important for understanding history." The Queen's advisor, General Korth, stepped forward. His massive frame made Marcus look even smaller. "My queen, this creature wants to play in the mud like a child. Should we not send it away?" Marcus just smiled and nodded politely at the general. He showed no anger or fear, even when Korth's claws came close to his face. Zixandra found this interesting. Every other species they had met either ran in terror or tried to fight. This human did neither. He just stood there, calm and peaceful. "Tell me, human," she said, "what makes you think you can survive on our world? My people are warriors. We do not tolerate weakness." "I understand, Your Majesty. My people believe in learning, not fighting. We think knowledge is more valuable than conquest. I hope to learn about your ancient culture and perhaps teach you about mine." Several guards laughed at this. A few made jokes about the soft human trying to teach the mighty Veltar anything. Marcus heard them but did not seem upset. He just kept smiling. "You speak of teaching us?" Zixandra's voice carried a hint of amusement. "What could your weak species possibly teach warriors like us?" "Perhaps nothing about war, Your Majesty. But we have learned much about art, music, and history. Sometimes old knowledge can help us understand the present better." The queen stood up from her throne. Her full height made Marcus look like a child standing before her. "By our laws, any visitor who wishes to stay must prove their worth in combat. Will you fight one of my warriors?" Marcus shook his head gently. "I am sorry, Your Majesty, but my people do not fight. We are lovers of peace, not war. I would rather leave than cause violence." This answer surprised everyone in the room. Most creatures would at least try to fight when challenged. But this human simply refused, as if fighting was not even possible for him. "You would rather run than defend your honor?" General Korth asked with a sneer. "I would rather live to continue learning," Marcus replied calmly. "My honor comes from knowledge, not from hurting others." Zixandra walked down from her throne until she stood directly in front of Marcus. Even sitting down, she would be taller than him. Up close, she could see that his skin was soft and unmarked by battle scars. His hands looked gentle, meant for holding books rather than weapons. "You truly are a strange creature," she said after a long moment. "Very well. You may stay and study our ruins, but you will do so under my protection. If anyone challenges you, they challenge me." The court buzzed with surprise. The queen had never protected a weak alien before. General Korth looked angry, but he said nothing. No one questioned the queen's decisions. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Marcus said with another bow. "I promise to cause no trouble." Over the following weeks, Marcus began his work at the ancient ruins outside the capital city. He spent his days carefully digging and cataloging small pieces of pottery and metal. The Veltar workers assigned to help him thought his work was boring and pointless. "Look at him," one worker said to another. "He gets excited about a broken cup. What kind of warrior cares about old dishes?" Marcus heard these comments but never responded with anger. He would just explain calmly why each piece was important for understanding the past. His gentle nature and endless patience began to intrigue some of the workers. The queen visited the dig site several times. She watched Marcus work with careful precision, treating each artifact like a precious treasure. He would spend hours cleaning a single piece, making detailed drawings and notes. "Why do you care so much about these old things?" she asked during one visit. Marcus looked up from a piece of carved stone he was studying. "Every artifact tells a story, Your Majesty. This piece shows how your ancestors lived, what they valued, what they believed. Understanding the past helps us understand ourselves. My ancestors were great warriors. That is all I need to know." They were also artists and builders, Marcus said, showing her the carved stone. Look at these symbols. They show a deep understanding of mathematics and astronomy. Your people were not just warriors. They were thinkers and creators too. Zixandra found herself returning to the dig site more often. She enjoyed listening to Marcus explain his discoveries. He had a way of making old stones and broken pottery seem important and exciting. The court began to notice the Queen's interest in the human scholar. Some whispered that she was spending too much time with the weak creature. Others worried that he might be influencing her somehow. General Korth confronted her one evening after she returned from another visit to the ruins. My queen, the court is concerned about your fascination with this human. Are you questioning my judgment, General? Never, my queen. But perhaps you should consider what message this sends to our enemies. A Veltar queen befriending a creature too weak to fight? Zixandra's eyes flashed with anger. That human has taught me more about our own history in a few weeks than our scholars learned in years. His weakness in combat does not make his knowledge worthless. As the months passed, Zixandra found herself looking forward to her conversations with Marcus. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. While her warriors spoke only of battles and conquest, he spoke of art, culture, and the beauty of learning. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Marcus pointed to the stars above. On my world, we have a saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. It means that knowledge and wisdom can accomplish more than violence. An interesting idea, Zixandra replied. But words cannot defend against claws and armor. Perhaps not directly, Your Majesty, but understanding your enemy's culture, their history, their motivations, that knowledge can be more powerful than any weapon. The Queen found herself considering his words long after he had retired to his quarters. This gentle human had somehow managed to challenge her thinking without ever raising his voice or showing disrespect. By the end of his first year on the planet, Marcus had become a fixture in the palace. The Queen had given him permanent quarters and invited him to court functions. Though some still mocked the weak human, none dared to challenge the Queen's obvious favor toward him. Marcus continued his scholarly work, always polite, always gentle, always interested in learning rather than fighting. To everyone who met him, he seemed exactly what he claimed to be, a peaceful scholar who could not hurt a fly. None of them suspected that this gentle facade hid something far more dangerous than any Veltar warrior could imagine. 2 years had passed since Marcus first arrived at the Veltar court. Queen Zixandra had done something that shocked the entire empire. She had married the gentle human scholar. The wedding ceremony was small but official, making Marcus her royal consort according to Veltar law. The marriage created waves throughout the empire. Many Veltar citizens could not understand why their powerful queen would choose such a weak mate. Marcus was still the same quiet scholar he had always been, spending his days studying artifacts and reading ancient texts. Look at our queen's pet human, whispered nobles at court gatherings. He cannot even lift a proper weapon, yet she treats him as an equal. Marcus heard these comments but never responded. He would simply smile politely and continue with his work. His gentle nature had not changed, and he still refused any suggestion of violence or combat. General Krathvar, the Queen's ambitious cousin, watched these developments with growing anger. He was a massive Veltar warrior, even larger than most of his species. His armor bore the scars of 100 battles and his claws had ended many lives. He had always believed he should rule the empire instead of Zixandra. This marriage makes us look weak, Krathvar told his supporters during a private meeting. How can other species respect an empire ruled by a queen who marries someone too cowardly to fight? His words found eager listeners among the military commanders. Many warriors felt embarrassed by their queen's choice of husband. They worried that enemies would see the Veltar as soft if their royal family included such a weak creature. Krathvar began visiting the outer systems of the empire, meeting with local governors and military leaders. He spoke carefully, never directly criticizing the queen, but always mentioning how the empire's reputation was suffering. I hear the Zephyrian alliance laughs at us now, he would say during these visits. They say the mighty Veltar have become so weak that even their queen chooses weakness over strength. These comments spread throughout the military ranks. Soldiers began grumbling about their leadership. Some border worlds started delaying their tribute payments, testing whether the central government would respond with force. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his peaceful existence at the palace. He had grown genuinely fond of Zixandra over their time together. Her intelligence impressed him, and he enjoyed their long conversations about history, culture, and philosophy. "You have changed since we married," Zixandra told him one evening as they shared dinner in their private chambers. "How so, my dear?" Marcus asked, setting down his reading tablet. "You seem more relaxed, more at home here. At first I thought you might be homesick for your own people." Marcus smiled warmly. "I am at home here with you. I have found something on this world I never expected to find." "What is that?" "Love," he said simply. "I came here to study your culture, but I found something much more valuable." Zixandra felt her hearts warm at his words. Despite their differences, despite what others said about their marriage, she had genuine feelings for this gentle human. His kindness and wisdom had won her over completely, but their peaceful life was about to be shattered. The trouble began during the annual military review, a grand ceremony where the Empire's greatest warriors demonstrated their skills. Thousands of Veltar soldiers filled the capital's great arena, showing off their combat abilities for the royal court. Krathvar had planned this moment carefully. He arrived at the ceremony in his finest battle armor, surrounded by his most loyal officers. The crowd cheered when he entered. He was popular among the common soldiers who respected his fighting reputation. Marcus sat beside the queen in the royal box, wearing his usual simple robes. He watched the combat demonstrations with polite interest, though he clearly preferred his books to displays of violence. When the formal demonstrations ended, Krathvar stepped into the center of the arena. The crowd fell silent as he raised his clawed hand for attention. "My queen," he called out in a voice that carried across the arena, "I come before you today with a matter of great importance to our empire." Zixandra leaned forward in her throne. "Speak, cousin. It concerns the ancient laws of our people and the honor of our royal house." Krathvar's voice grew louder, ensuring everyone could hear. "Our laws state clearly that any consort of the ruling monarch must be capable of defending their position in combat." A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone knew where this was heading, but no one had dared to speak it aloud until now. "Your human husband has never proven himself in battle," Krathvar continued. "According to our most sacred traditions, I have the right to challenge his worthiness." Zixandra's claws dug into her throne's armrests. "You dare question my choice of consort?" "I question whether he meets the requirements of our law, my queen. A consort who cannot fight cannot truly protect the royal line." "I formally challenge Marcus Chen to the trial of claws." The arena erupted in shocked voices. The trial of claws was an ancient tradition, a fight to the death between the challenger and the challenged. It had not been invoked in over 50 years. Marcus remained calm in his seat, though Zixandra could see the concern in his eyes. He leaned over to whisper in her ear, "What exactly is the trial of claws?" "Single combat," she whispered back. "To the death. The winner proves their right to their position." Marcus nodded slowly as if he had expected something like this eventually. He stood up and walked to the edge of the royal box where the entire arena could see him. "I accept your challenge, General Krathvar," Marcus called out in his calm, steady voice. "However, I request the traditional 3 days to prepare, as is my right under Veltar law." This brought laughter from many in the crowd. What could a weak human possibly do in 3 days to prepare for combat against a seasoned Veltar warrior? Krathvar himself smiled with confident amusement. "Granted," Krathvar replied. 3 days from now we meet in this arena. May the strongest warrior win." As the crowd began to disperse, many already placing bets on how quickly the human would die, Zixandra pulled Marcus aside. "You cannot do this," she said urgently. "I can champion you myself. The law allows it in special circumstances." "No," Marcus said firmly. "That would only make things worse. Your people would never respect a consort who hides behind his wife's strength. Then what will you do? Krathvar is one of our finest warriors. He has killed dozens of enemies in single combat." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, looking thoughtful. "I will need access to the Royal Forge," he said finally. "The Forge? What for?" "I need to make something. Also, I will need privacy for the next 3 days. Complete privacy even from you." Zixandra stared at her husband. There was something different in his voice, something she had never heard before. For just a moment, his usual gentle expression seemed to slip, revealing something harder underneath. "Marcus, what are you planning?" "Trust me," he said, taking her hand gently. I know what I'm doing. That night, Marcus made several strange requests. He asked for specific types of metal from the royal stores, alloys that most Veltar had never heard of. He requested access to the deepest levels of the palace, areas that were normally restricted. Most puzzling of all, he asked for his personal belongings to be brought from his quarters, including several items he had kept locked in a private case since his arrival. What is in that case? Zixandra asked as servants carried it to the forge area. Research materials, Marcus replied. Things from my homeworld that might be useful. But Zixandra noticed that the case was much heavier than it should be if it only contained books and papers. When Marcus carried it himself, she could see the strain in his arms, as if it held something much denser than research notes. For the next 2 days, strange sounds came from the forge. Hammering, heating, and other metalworking noises that seemed to follow no pattern the Veltar smiths recognized. When curious servants tried to peek inside, they found the doors locked and Marcus working alone. On the second night, Zixandra could stand the mystery no longer. She used her royal authority to override the locks and entered the forge chamber. What she found there would change everything she thought she knew about her gentle husband. The forge chamber glowed with orange light from the fires within. Zixandra stepped quietly through the doorway, expecting to find Marcus struggling with unfamiliar tools, perhaps trying to create some kind of protective armor for the coming battle. Instead, she found something that made her blood run cold. Marcus stood at the central anvil, but this was not the gentle scholar she knew. His movements were precise and controlled, each hammer strike falling exactly where he intended. The metal he worked glowed white-hot, and he folded it over and over with a skill that would have impressed the Empire's finest weaponsmiths. But it was not just his unexpected skill that shocked her. It was the transformation in Marcus himself. Gone was the soft, peaceful expression she had grown to love. His face showed intense concentration, and his eyes held a focus she had never seen before. He moved like a predator, every motion calculated and efficient. The weapon taking shape under his hands was unlike anything in the Veltar arsenal. It was a long, curved blade that seemed to catch and hold the firelight. The metal itself looked different, darker than Veltar steel, with patterns that swirled through it like flowing water. "What are you doing?" Zixandra whispered. Marcus looked up, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes that made her step backward. It was not fear or gentleness, it was the look of a killer. Then, just as quickly, his familiar warm expression returned. "I am preparing for tomorrow," he said calmly, setting down his hammer. "That blade, where did you learn to make such a thing?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the weapon he had been crafting. The metal had cooled to a dull red, but the patterns in it still seemed to move in the flickering light. "I have not been entirely honest with you," he said finally, "about who I am or why I came here." Zixandra felt her heart sink. "You lied to me?" "Not lied, but I did not tell you everything." Marcus set the blade aside and turned to face her fully. "I am a xenoanthropologist, that part is true, but that is not all I am." He walked to his opened case and pulled out several items that clearly were not research materials. Zixandra saw compact tools, strange metals, and what looked like military equipment designed for humans. "My full name is Colonel Marcus Chen, retired from the Earth Defense Forces. I served 12 years in the military before becoming a scholar." "Colonel?" Zixandra's voice was barely a whisper. "You were a soldier?" "Not just any soldier. I was part of Earth's Special Operations Command. My specialty was deep reconnaissance and close-quarters combat." Marcus picked up one of the strange metal pieces from his case. "These are not pottery shards I have been studying, my dear. They are fragments of weapons left by previous human expeditions to this region of space." Zixandra stared at the object in his hands. Now that he pointed it out, she could see it was clearly part of a manufactured item, not ancient pottery. "Previous expeditions? But you were the first humans to visit our world." "The first to visit openly," Marcus corrected. "Earth has been watching the Veltar Empire for years. We needed to understand your military capabilities, your technology, your culture, in case you ever decided that human space looked like an attractive target for conquest." The Queen felt the world spinning around her. Everything she thought she knew about her husband was crumbling. "So your marriage to me was just a mission?" Marcus's expression softened and he reached toward her. "It started that way," he admitted. "But it became much more. What I feel for you is real, Zixandra. That was never part of the plan." How can I believe anything you say now? Because I am telling you the truth now when I could have continued the deception. Because tomorrow I am going to reveal abilities that will expose everything I have been hiding. Marcus gestured toward the cooling blade. I could have found another way to deal with Krathvar, but I will not let him hurt you or take your throne. Zixandra looked at the weapon again. It was beautiful and deadly, clearly crafted by someone with years of experience. What kind of sword is that? My people call it a katana. It is based on an ancient design from Earth but made with modern materials and techniques. Marcus picked up the blade carefully, testing its balance. The metal is a human alloy that does not exist naturally. It is harder than diamond but flexible like spring steel. And you know how to use such a weapon? Marcus was quiet for a moment, then moved into a combat stance that was completely different from anything Zixandra had ever seen. His entire body seemed to change, becoming fluid and dangerous. The gentle scholar disappeared entirely, replaced by something that made her predator instincts scream warnings. I was considered one of the best sword fighters in the Earth military, he said quietly. I have fought in 17 major battles and countless smaller engagements. I have never lost a single combat. He demonstrated a few movements with the unfinished blade, and Zixandra watched in fascination and growing fear. Marcus moved like liquid mercury, the sword becoming an extension of his body. Every motion was precise and deadly. Why swords? She asked. Your people have energy weapons, do they not? We do, but sometimes you need to fight quietly. Sometimes you need to get close to your enemy without them knowing you are dangerous until it is too late. Marcus lowered the blade and looked at her seriously. Sometimes you need your enemies to underestimate you. Like you made us underestimate humans. Like I made you underestimate humans, he confirmed. Every moment I spent here, every artifact I studied, every conversation we had, I was learning about Veltar society, your military, your weaknesses. Zixandra felt anger rising in her chest. So I was just part of your intelligence gathering? At first, yes, but you became much more than that. Marcus set the sword down and approached her slowly, his hands open and non-threatening. I came here to spy on you, but I stayed because I fell in love with you. The mission ended months ago, but I could not bring myself to leave. What was your mission? Marcus hesitated, then seemed to decide on complete honesty. To determine whether the Veltar Empire posed a threat to human colonies, to map your military capabilities, to identify key leaders and possible weaknesses in your government structure. And what did you conclude? That your empire is powerful but not interested in expansion beyond your current borders. That your people value honor and strength but are not naturally aggressive toward non-threatening neighbors. That you personally are a fair and intelligent ruler who could potentially become an ally rather than an enemy. Zixandra considered this information. So Earth decided we were not a threat? Earth decided that you were not an immediate threat. But they also decided that having an agent in place would be useful for maintaining that status. Marcus smiled sadly. I was supposed to stay here permanently, continuing to gather information while maintaining my cover as a harmless scholar. But tomorrow, you will destroy that cover. Yes. When I fight Krathvar, everyone will see what humans are really capable of. The illusion of weakness will be shattered forever. Zixandra walked closer to the sword, studying its alien design. Are all humans like you? Hidden warriors pretending to be peaceful? Not all. Many of my people truly are peaceful scholars and artists, but enough of us are warriors to make attacking humanity a very dangerous mistake. Marcus picked up the blade again, running his finger carefully along its edge. We learned long ago that appearing weak while being strong is much safer than appearing strong while being weak. Your entire species practices deception on this scale. Not deception exactly. We simply do not advertise our military capabilities. When other species see us, they see explorers, traders, scientists. They do not see the warships hidden in deep space, or the soldiers like me placed throughout the galaxy. The implications hit Zixandra like a physical blow. How many of you are there? Hidden among other species? Enough, Marcus said simply. But I hope you never find out exactly how many. I hope our species can be friends rather than enemies. Zixandra looked at her husband, this stranger who had been living beside her for 2 years. Can I trust anything about you? Are your feelings for me real or just part of your training? Marcus set down the sword and took her hands in his. For a moment, the dangerous warrior disappeared and she saw the gentle man she had fallen in love with. My feelings for you are the most real thing in my life, he said softly. Everything else, the mission, the deception, the hidden abilities, that is just what I do. But what I feel for you is who I am. How can I know the difference? Because tomorrow, when I fight Krathvar, I will be fighting not as Colonel Marcus Chen on a mission for Earth. I will be fighting as your husband, protecting the woman I love. There is a difference, and you will see it. Zixandra looked into his eyes, searching for the truth. What she saw there was complex. Love and determination, gentleness and deadly purpose all mixed together. This was her husband, but he was so much more than she had ever imagined. Will you win tomorrow? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since she had known him, it was not entirely gentle. My dear wife, Krathvar has no idea what he has challenged. He thinks he is fighting a weak human scholar. Instead, he will face something your people have never seen before. What is that? A human warrior who has something to protect. The arena was packed beyond capacity. Word of the trial of Claws had spread throughout the capital city, and thousands of Veltar had come to witness what they expected to be a quick and brutal execution. Even citizens from distant worlds had traveled to see the spectacle of their queen's human consort facing a legendary warrior. Betting pools had formed in every tavern and marketplace. The odds heavily favored Krathvar, with most wagers being placed on how quickly the human would die, rather than whether he would survive. Some cruel gamblers even bet on which part of Marcus would be removed first. Queen Zixandra sat rigid on her throne in the royal box, trying to hide her anxiety. She had barely slept the night before, haunted by the revelations about her husband's true nature. Even knowing his secret, she found it hard to believe that the gentle man she loved could face someone like Krathvar and survive. The morning sun blazed down on the arena's sandy floor as officials prepared the fighting circle. Ancient Veltar symbols were drawn in the sand, marking the boundaries within which the combat must take place. Traditional weapons were displayed on stands around the circle, though both fighters could bring their own arms if they chose. General Korth announced the rules to the crowd. This is a trial of Claws conducted according to the most ancient laws of our people. The combat continues until one fighter yields or dies. No quarter will be asked or given. The winner claims the right they fight for. A great horn sounded and Krathvar entered the arena. He was a magnificent sight, even Zixandra had to admit. Standing 9 feet tall, he wore ceremonial battle armor that gleamed like black metal. His natural chitin plates had been polished to mirror brightness, and his claws had been sharpened to razor points. Scars covered his arms and chest, proud marks of previous battles. The crowd roared its approval as Krathvar raised his arms in triumph. He had fought in the arena many times before, always emerging victorious. His reputation as a warrior was known throughout the Empire. Today, he called out to the crowd, we restore honor to the royal house. Today we show that the Veltar bow only to strength. More cheers erupted from the stands. Many spectators were already celebrating what they saw as inevitable victory. Then the horn sounded again and Marcus entered. The contrast was shocking. Where Krathvar was massive and imposing, Marcus looked small and fragile. He wore simple white robes that seemed to glow in the harsh sunlight. In his hands he carried a single sword in a plain wooden scabbard. The crowd's cheers turned to laughter and jeering. Someone shouted, "Where is your armor, little human?" Another called out, "Did you forget to bring a real weapon?" Marcus walked calmly to the center of the circle, apparently unbothered by the mockery. He bowed respectfully to Krathvar, then turned and bowed to his wife in the royal box. Zixandra found herself holding her breath. Even knowing what she now knew about Marcus, seeing him stand next to Krathvar made her realize how impossible this seemed. Her husband looked like a child facing a giant. "Are you ready to die, human?" Krathvar asked with a sneer. "I will make it quick if you yield now and admit your unworthiness." "I am ready to begin," Marcus replied calmly. His voice carried clearly across the arena, showing no fear or doubt. The official raised his hand. Let the trial of Claws commence. What happened next would be talked about in the Veltar Empire for generations. As soon as the signal was given, Marcus underwent a complete transformation. The change was so sudden and dramatic that many spectators later claimed it was like watching magic. His entire posture shifted. The gentle scholar disappeared, replaced by something that moved like liquid death. His hands went to his sword, and the blade seemed to flow from its scabbard rather than being drawn. The weapon itself made the crowd gasp. It caught the sunlight like captured starfire, and strange patterns seemed to ripple along its surface. But it was not the sword that silenced the arena. It was the way Marcus held it. Every Veltar was born with fighting instincts, and those instincts were now screaming danger signals. The small human no longer looked harmless. He looked like the most deadly thing they had ever seen. Krathvar felt it too. His confident expression faltered as he stared at his opponent. Something was wrong. This was not the weak creature he had expected to face. "What trickery is this?" he demanded. Marcus said nothing. He simply assumed a fighting stance that was alien to Veltar eyes but unmistakably lethal. The sword became an extension of his body, moving in slow, hypnotic patterns. Krathvar charged. He moved with all the speed and power that had made him famous throughout the Empire. His claws struck toward Marcus with enough force to tear through steel plating. Marcus was not there. The human flowed around Krathvar's attack like water around a stone. His sword moved in a silver arc that left a thin red line across the general's arm. Krathvar spun around, shocked. He had never missed a target at such close range. He looked down at his arm and saw that his supposedly impenetrable chitin armor had been cut cleanly through. The crowd fell completely silent. "Impossible," someone whispered. Krathvar attacked again, this time more carefully, but Marcus seemed to anticipate every move. The human danced around the massive Veltar warrior, his sword leaving cut after cut. None of the wounds were deep enough to be fatal, but each one proved that Krathvar's armor meant nothing against that alien blade. "Stand still and fight," Krathvar roared in frustration. Marcus replied by moving even faster. His sword work was beautiful and terrible to watch. He struck from impossible angles, moving in ways that seemed to defy physics. Each cut was placed with surgical precision. Slowly, methodically, Marcus began to dismantle his opponent. He cut through the straps holding Krathvar's armor plates. He severed muscles that controlled the general's strongest attacks. He created a web of small wounds that sapped strength and mobility. All the while, Marcus himself remained untouched. He flowed around every attack, always a step ahead of his enemy's movements. The crowd watched in stunned silence as their great warrior was systematically destroyed by a creature they had thought was helpless. "This is not possible," General Korth whispered to himself. "No being can move like that." But Zixandra was beginning to understand. This was what humans really were when they stopped pretending to be harmless. This was the true face of the species that had been quietly watching the galaxy from the shadows. Krathvar made one final desperate attack. Gathering all his remaining strength, he lunged forward with both claws extended, putting everything into a strike that should have been impossible to avoid. Marcus stepped aside at the last possible moment and brought his sword around in a perfect arc. Krathvar crashed to the ground. His claws lay severed in the sand beside him, and his armor hung in pieces. He was alive but completely defeated. Marcus stood over him, the point of his sword resting gently against Krathvar's throat. One tiny movement would end the general's life. "Do you yield?" Marcus asked quietly. Krathvar looked up at the human who had destroyed him so completely. In Marcus's eyes, he saw something that made him understand why no Veltar warrior should ever underestimate this species again. "I yield," he whispered. Marcus stepped back and lowered his sword. The gentle expression returned to his face as if the deadly warrior had never existed. "Thank you for an honorable fight," he said with a polite bow. The arena remained silent for a long moment. 50,000 Veltar tried to process what they had just witnessed. Then Queen Zixandra stood up in the royal box. "The trial of claws is concluded," she announced. "Marcus Chen has proven his right to stand as royal consort." Slowly, uncertainly, the crowd began to cheer. But it was not the same kind of cheering that had greeted Krathvar. This was the sound of people who had just realized that everything they thought they knew about the universe was wrong. As Marcus cleaned his sword and returned it to its scabbard, conversations began throughout the arena. How did he move like that? Did you see how easily that blade cut through armor? If one human can do this, what can their armies do? These questions would spread throughout the Empire within days. The balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted, and everyone knew it. Marcus walked calmly out of the arena, once again looking like a harmless scholar. But no one would ever see him that way again. The age of underestimating humanity was over. The victory celebration in the royal palace was unlike any in Veltar history. Instead of the usual boisterous warrior feast, the atmosphere was subdued and thoughtful. Nobles and military commanders spoke in quiet groups, their conversations filled with questions that had no easy answers. Marcus sat beside Queen Zixandra at the high table, once again dressed in his simple robes. To anyone who had not witnessed the trial, he looked exactly as he always had, a gentle scholar who seemed out of place among the armored warriors. But everyone in the room had seen the footage of his fight with Krathvar, and the illusion of harmlessness was forever shattered. The reports are already spreading throughout the Empire, General Korth informed the Queen. Every world will know about the trial within days. Our enemies will know too. Good, Zixandra replied. Let them know that the royal house is protected by more than they imagined. Across the room, groups of officers debated what they had witnessed. The conversations followed similar patterns throughout the palace. I have fought for 30 years, one veteran commander said to his colleagues. I have never seen anything move like that human did. It was like he could see the future. The way his blade cut through Krathvar's armor, another added. Our best weapons could not have done that so easily. If one human can fight like that, what about their armies? What about their fleets? These questions reached far beyond the palace walls. Within hours, urgent messages were being sent to every corner of the Veltar Empire. Military leaders demanded information about human capabilities. Planetary governors asked for guidance on how to handle human visitors. Trade negotiators wondered if their agreements with human colonies needed to be reconsidered. The most interesting reactions came from the Empire's neighbors and rivals, the Zephyrian Alliance, which had been making subtle threats about Veltar border worlds, suddenly became much more diplomatic in their communications. Ambassador Zeftal, who had been scheduled to deliver an ultimatum about mining rights, instead requested a peaceful trade conference. The Koran hegemony, known for their aggressive expansion policies, quietly canceled their planned military exercises near human space. Their war fleets withdrew to defensive positions, and their diplomats began making inquiries about establishing formal relations with Earth. But the most significant changes happened within Veltar society itself. Young warriors who had previously mocked humans began studying videos of Marcus's fighting techniques. They analyzed every movement, trying to understand the principles behind such fluid combat. Some even requested permission to travel to human worlds for training. I want to learn to fight like that, declared Captain Vextor, one of the Empire's rising military stars. If humans can master such skills, perhaps we can learn from them. This attitude spread rapidly through the warrior castes. What had started as humiliation, being outfought by a supposedly weak species, transformed into curiosity and respect. The Veltar were nothing if not practical about combat effectiveness. Marcus found himself in an impossible position. Overnight, he had gone from being dismissed as weak to being seen as a potential teacher of superhuman fighting skills. They want me to train their warriors, he told Zixandra during one of their private conversations. Half the military command has requested lessons in human combat techniques. Will you do it? Marcus considered the question carefully. Some of it, perhaps. Basic fitness and discipline techniques that might help them. But I cannot teach them to fight like humans. Why not? Because what you saw in the arena was not just training. It was the result of a completely different evolutionary path. Marcus gestured to his own body. Humans developed as endurance hunters on a world with high gravity and dangerous predators. Our reflexes, our muscle fibers, our nervous systems, everything about us was shaped by millions of years of survival challenges that your people never faced. Zixandra found this fascinating. So not all of your abilities can be taught. Not all of them. I can teach discipline, strategy, weapon maintenance. But the speed, the reflexes, the way I moved in that fight, that comes from being human. This revelation had important implications for the Empire's military planning. If human combat abilities were partially biological, rather than purely trained, it meant that the Veltar could never completely match them. It also meant that humanity's military potential was even greater than initially feared. The political ramifications were equally significant. Krathvar's defeat had effectively ended his challenge to Zixandra's rule. The general himself, once he recovered from his injuries, publicly acknowledged Marcus's right to his position. More importantly, He became one of the strongest advocates for peaceful relations with humanity. "I have faced their strength in personal combat," he announced to the military council. "I speak from experience when I say that we do not want humans as enemies." This testimony carried enormous weight. Krathavar's reputation as a warrior was unquestioned, and his admission of human superiority could not be dismissed as propaganda or exaggeration. The Queen's position was stronger than it had ever been. The noble houses that had whispered about her weak husband now competed to show their respect for the royal consort. Trade delegations that had delayed their tribute payments suddenly arrived with generous gifts and renewed loyalty oaths, but perhaps the most important changes were happening in the relationship between Marcus and Zixandra themselves. "I need to know," she said during one of their evening walks through the palace gardens. "When you look at me now, do you see a target for intelligence gathering? Or do you see your wife?" Marcus stopped walking and took her hands in his. "I see the woman I love. I see someone who accepted me when she thought I was weak, and who still loves me now that she knows I am dangerous. I see the person I want to spend the rest of my life protecting. Even though your mission is over, especially because my mission is over." Marcus smiled. Earth wanted an agent in place to monitor the Veltar Empire. Instead, they got something much better, a genuine alliance between our peoples. Is that what we have? An alliance? We have something stronger than a formal treaty. We have trust, built through personal relationships. Your people respect human strength now, but more importantly, they see that we can be trusted to use that strength responsibly. Over the following months, this personal alliance expanded into broader cooperation between their species. Veltar warriors trained with human instructors in advanced combat techniques. Human scholars worked with Veltar historians to uncover ancient secrets. Trade agreements were signed that benefited both civilizations. Most significantly, joint patrol fleets began operating along the borders of both territories. The sight of human and Veltar ships working together sent a clear message to potential aggressors throughout the galaxy. The message was simple. Humanity was no longer hiding its capabilities, and it had powerful friends. Marcus returned to his scholarly work, but now his research took on new dimensions. Every artifact he studied, every cultural detail he documented, became part of a growing database of galactic knowledge. But now he worked openly, as an official liaison between Earth and the Veltar Empire. "You have changed the galaxy," Zixandra told him one evening as they reviewed reports from various worlds. "We changed it together," Marcus corrected. "Your willingness to accept humans as equals, even after learning about our deception, made peaceful cooperation possible." "And if I had reacted differently?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Then we would have learned whether human military planning was as good as human combat skills." Zixandra understood the implication. Humanity had not just hidden their abilities, they had prepared for multiple scenarios. Marcus had been one agent among many, and his success or failure would have triggered different responses from Earth. "How many of your people are out there, hidden among other species?" "Enough," Marcus said simply. "But I hope they can all reveal themselves peacefully as I did. I hope they can all find what I found here." "What is that?" Marcus smiled and pulled his wife closer. "A reason to stop hiding and start building something better." In the years that followed, the galaxy became a very different place. The revelation of human capabilities led to a new balance of power, but it was a balance based on mutual respect rather than fear. Other species began to wonder what secrets their own neighbors might be hiding. Diplomatic relations became more careful and thoughtful. Wars became rarer as civilizations realized that any potential enemy might be stronger than they appeared. And at the center of it all, in the royal palace of the Veltar Empire, a human scholar and an alien queen proved that love could bridge any gap, even the gap between species, between truth and deception, between the gentle mask we wear and the strength we hide beneath it. The age of humanity's secret had ended, but the age of humanity's friendship with the galaxy was just beginning.